"Mom, take a blanket down to the storage room. We have guests tonight. Don't embarrass us." My son said it without looking at me, his tone as harsh as if he were ordering a maid. His wife stood by the kitchen counter, arms folded, adding one more cut. "That room is big enough for one old lady." I went numb in the upscale apartment I'd bought with my husband's life insurance, the place that had once been our shared dream. A peaceful home where you can live in safety. But now, my son had turned it into a stage to humiliate his own mother. I didn't cry. I set my teacup down, looked him straight in the eyes, and said quietly, "All right." When the basement door clicked shut, I opened the lid of a small metal box hidden behind the storage bins. Inside were a camera, a copy of the condo contract, and a USB recorder. Tonight they thought they'd pushed me to the bottom of the house, but this is exactly where I would start climbing back to the top of my life. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. My name is Audrey Whitmore, 67, widowed for almost 2 years. I spent my life as a bookkeeping secretary at a small insurance company in Charlotte. Careful, quiet work, just like me. I'm not wealthy, but I get by. I'm not fearless, but I'm steady enough to withstand life's stormy seasons. I have one son, Brandon, the person I once believed was the last bright part of my world after my husband died. I used to think I was a good mother, a fortunate woman with a family. But today, standing in the apartment I bought with my husband's life insurance and hearing my son tell me to sleep in the storage room, I realize this. Sometimes you don't truly know who you are until your own blood tests your dignity. After Gil, my husband, passed, the house we'd lived in for 35 years turned cold, like a museum of memories. Every morning, I still brewed 2 cups of coffee, then remembered there was only one person left to drink. Every evening, the empty, wooden chair at the table reminded me that the only person who ever looked at me with gratitude was gone for good. I'm 67. At this age, people learn to slow down, but loneliness never does. It threads through every breath. 3 months after the funeral, Gil's lawyer called. He had left me $600,000 in life insurance, an amount I could barely imagine. Gil had kept it quiet, maybe so I wouldn't worry. I cried, but they were the first warm tears I'd shed in months. I thought, maybe he was still trying to protect me, even from far away. I spent weeks thinking. Then one March morning, I stood before a map of North Carolina and set my hand on Charlotte, the city where we dreamed of living in retirement. I remembered what Gil always said. A small condo near downtown, a balcony with nightlights. When we're older, all you need is a place to sit and breathe free. I smiled and whispered to his photo, "All right, I'll do it for both of them. Us." 3 weeks later, I signed for a 2-bedroom condo in a new building in South End, quiet but close enough to downtown. Price: $400,000, including access to a pool, a gym, a private parking space, and a roomy storage area in the basement. I had $200,000 left, enough for upgrades and a cushion for old age. On key day, my hands shook. Sunlight poured into the rooms at noon, and I felt as if Gil were standing there, smiling gently. "Well done, Audrey. You finally did what you deserve." I picked every item myself: cream curtains, a brown fabric sofa, a vase of lavender. Everything in that condo held a piece of our memories. I called my son, excited. "Brandon, I've got great news. I just bought a new condo. You and Tessa will love it." Silence for a few seconds, then his voice strange and cold. "With Dad's insurance money, right?" I hesitated. "Yes, Gil. Left it for me." "And you spent $400,000 on that?" "Yes, but there's still $200,000 for a scamly." He cut me off. "Did you ever think to ask me first?" "Ask you?" "This was your father's money. He left it to me." A hard breath on the other end, then a hang-up. I stood there listening to the long tone in a kitchen that still smelled of fresh paint. It felt like I'd lost something deeper than money, the little boy who once held my hand on his first day of school. 3 days later, the phone rang while I was arranging the living room. Brandon. His voice sounded softer, but there was something false in the sweetness. "Are you home this weekend, Mom?" "Yes, are you coming by?" "Yeah." "Tessa wants to bring her parents and a few friends to see the place. They want to tour it. And you can stay, but there's one thing." "What thing?" I asked. "Could you move down to the storage room in the basement for a few days?" I thought I misheard. "The storage room? Are you joking?" "No, Mom, just a few days. The condo feels smaller than the photos. Tessa doesn't want guests to see you living with us. They might think we can't afford to take care of you." I went numb. "Are you afraid people will think I'm poor?" Brandon lowered his voice. "I just need you to be reasonable. Don't let anyone see that you're old and still, clinging to us." I sat down, gripping the phone. "Brandon, this is my place. I bought it with the money your father left." He paused, then spoke slowly. "Exactly. It was my father's money and I'm the legal heir. Don't forget that." He hung up. That night I sat alone in a home that still smelled of new wood, feeling both hurt and hollow. I had lost my husband, and now I might be losing my son. But instead of crying, I turned on the lamp and opened a notebook. I wrote one line: "No one gets to steal your dignity, not even your own child." The next morning, I started moving. I bought a mini camera and hid it behind a vase on the TV console, connected to my phone. I photographed every document, purchase contract, bank transfers, and saved them to the cloud. I was no longer the woman who bowed her head for fear of losing family. I understood now. If they wanted to play dirty, I'd use my head, not my tears. That afternoon, Tessa texted, "Please don't go on about the price. My parents think the condo's about $650,000. Just say that it sounds better. Thanks in advance." I looked at the message, my heart stinging even as a smile formed. I took a screenshot, evidence number 2. They seemed to have forgotten I'd been a bookkeeping secretary for more than 30 years. I understand the value of paperwork and how to use it when it counts. 2 days before they arrived, I did what Brandon asked. I tidied the basement storage room. It was small, with bare concrete walls and weak yellow light, but clean. There was an outlet and an internal landline connected to the condo upstairs. When I lifted the receiver to test it, I heard the dial tone. It still worked. I laughed softly. It could be a lifeline, or a line that ties someone down. I set a wooden chair, a light blanket, and our wedding photo on a little table. "If you won't protect yourself, don't blame them for treating you poorly," Gil used to say. I looked at his picture and nodded. The next evening, I heard a knock. Brandon walked in wearing a crisp shirt, but his voice was dry. "Is the room ready?" "Yes." "If you embarrass us, I'll put you in a nursing home. Don't try anything." I didn't answer. I slid my hand into my pocket where a tiny recorder was glowing. "Are you finished?" I asked, barely above a breath. "Yeah." "Then so am I." He left and the door slammed. Footsteps faded up the stairs. I stood in that small room, drew a deep breath, and hit record again. I looked around the cold walls, the metal box, Gil's photo. And I knew, from the darkest corner of this home, I would start lighting my life again. I don't even know why I picked up the landline that day. Maybe it was the habit of a former bookkeeper always checking whether things work. The morning was quiet. Sunlight fell across the small table in the storage room I'd turned into a temporary bed. On the shelf sat a thermos of coffee and Gil's photo, his kind smile telling me to stay calm. I meant only to dust the wall phone and see if it worked. But as my hand touched the receiver, I heard a soft click, and then a familiar voice, my son's. "Did you finish the checks?" Brandon said, voice low. "Done," Tessa replied, almost eager. I told my parents the condo's worth $650,000. My dad even said you have a good eye. I froze. 650,000? I gripped the receiver, terrified but silent. Brandon gave a short laugh. Good. Let them think that. Can't have them knowing my mother bought it cheap. They'd say, I'm not capable. I know, Tessa said, her voice light as silk and sharp as a blade. Pratt men have pride. My dad always told me, don't marry a man who can't afford a proper home. Brandon paused, then sighed. That's why I need that number. Don't let them doubt anything. I leaned against the wall, forcing down the tremor. So that 650,000 Tessa told me to repeat was just a small piece of a bigger plan, a full script to turn this condo into theirs. Still holding the receiver, my heart pounding, I heard Tessa again, slow, calculating. What about the old woman? We can't let your mother stay here forever. I can't stand pretending she's the owner. Brandon gave the same sly laugh I'd heard when he was a child caught lying. I'm on it. I have a cousin who's a psychiatrist. He owes me a favor, $5,000, and he'll sign off that my mother has cognitive decline. Then we can petition the court for guardianship. My hand turned cold, fingers numb. And then? Tessa asked, as if discussing a simple purchase. Then, Brandon said, we'll sell the condo and move her to a cheap nursing home out in the suburbs. Trust me, those places only need a few months and that's it. Older folks don't handle being yanked from their environment. They go downhill fast. Tessa let out a thin laugh that turned my blood to ice. You're cruel. No, Brandon said softly. I'm practical. My father was too soft. I'm not. I pressed the receiver tighter, barely breathing. Each word pricked like a needle. Tessa asked, You're sure she suspects nothing? Not a thing, Brandon said, smug. She still thinks I'm the dutiful son. I could take everything and she'd apologize if I raised my voice. Tessa giggled. That's insane. What mother could be that blind? She's always been that way, Brandon said. Her whole life. I set the receiver down very slowly, afraid a sound would give me away. I shook all over, but no tears came. In my mind, I heard Gil's voice from years ago. You're stronger than you think, Audrey, but only when you're pushed to the wall do you learn you can stand. Now I understood. I sat in the old wooden chair, my fingers finding the tiny recorder in my pocket. I hit record, repeating exactly what they'd said, every detail, every number, every step. Then I photographed the wall clock proof of the call time. I saved everything carefully. The shaking stopped. A cold clarity took over. About an hour later, when I stepped out of that basement room, I saw Brandon and Tessa strolling the lobby with her parents, hand in hand, smiling like model spouses. I walked by quietly with a trash bag so they wouldn't notice. Tessa glanced at me, a stiff smile. Hi, Mom. Is it okay down there? I left some extra blankets for you. I nodded and smiled. Thank you. It's very quiet. Good, she said lightly, turning to her mother. She's a bit sensitive, but very sweet. Everyone laughed. Glassware clinked. I kept walking, saying nothing. Each step sealed another door inside me, the door of trust, of motherhood, of hope. That night I sat at the small desk in the basement, opened my laptop, and copied the recording to a USB labeled Conversation, Proof 1. I photographed the call log from the internal phone and emailed it to myself. I was grateful for my cautious nature, the same habit coworkers once teased as the double-check lady. Turns out, it's what was saving me. A draft slipped under the basement door, and the night air felt dry and cold. I pulled on a sweater, my eyes landing on Gil's photo. I spoke softly, as if he could still hear. See that? They want everything. But I won't make it easy. In my mind, I knew exactly who to call, someone I trusted, someone who had never failed me. Naomi Brooks. Naomi and I had been friends since our 20s. We once worked at the same company, quick, tough, and a believer in justice. Later, she went to law school and became a civil attorney focusing on elder rights. We hadn't seen each other in years, but her number stayed in my phone as if my heart knew I would need her someday. I called. Her voice was warm and steady, just like before. "Goodness, Audrey, it's been ages. Are you okay?" I paused, holding back a sob. "Naomi, I need to see you, as soon as possible." Hearing my shaking voice, she turned serious. "What happened?" "I can't say over the phone. Just know, someone is trying to take my home. Someone in the family." Silence on the line. Then Naomi spoke, firm and low. "Listen to me, Audrey. Do not say another word to them. Stay quiet and gather everything: texts, recordings, documents. Don't react, don't get angry, don't cry. I'll drive to Charlotte in the morning. Understood?" I nodded, though she couldn't see. "Thank you, Naomi." "No thanks needed," she said gently. "From now on, you're not alone." After we hung up, I sat a long time, listening to the clock tick. Far-off traffic hummed like a memory. The basement room felt less tight. I drew a deep breath and closed my eyes. In the dark, Gil's voice came back. "You're stronger than you think." I smiled faintly. "Yes, I am stronger than I think." And this time, I would prove it not with tears, but with the truth. I didn't sleep that night. Brandon and Tessa's voices still echoed like a tunnel, every word of their plan to strip me of everything. Near dawn, I got up, turned on the lamp, and chose something I'd never dared before: face the truth, no matter how much it hurt. In a steel case I'd brought from the old house, there was a small black lockbox. Gil had told me, "Keep it in case you ever need it." He used to store important papers there: insurance, savings certificates, even a few unsigned will drafts. I hadn't opened it since he died. But that morning, with first light slipping under the basement door, I felt I had to. I pulled the box out, wiped the thin layer of dust, and slid in the tiny key I still kept on Gil's old keyring. A soft click, and the lid lifted. Inside were neatly stacked folders, Gil's familiar tidy handwriting on each cover. One made my heart seize: "Brandon, confidential." I sat down, hands trembling, and turned the pages. Printed emails, handwritten notes, a few yellowed receipts. My eyes froze on the first line of one email. "Dad, please help me this one last time. Just 10,000. I promise I'll pay it back in 6 months. Below it, Gil's reply in blue ink. "Brandon, this is the 5th time this year. Tell me the truth, what is going on?" I read on. The next pages tracked every amount. April 2018, $8,000, co-worker's investment. September 2018, $12,000, Tessa's hospital. February 2019, $15,000, short-term loan real estate project. August 2020, $20,000. Startup investment. And most recent, just months before Gil died, $35,000, urgent loan, more than $90,000 in total taken from Gil's savings and stock sales, with promises to pay it back. On the last page, Gil had written, "Brandon, I love you, but you're pushing this too far. If there's a next time, I'll have to tell your mother." Under that line was a hurried strike-through, then a smaller line in a shaky hand. "No, I won't tell her. He's still our son." I set the paper down, my heart gripped tight. There was more. At the end of the folder was a sealed letter addressed to me. "Audrey, if you're reading this, I'm no longer there." I sat, still for a long while, then opened it. Gil's voice flowed through my mind as if he were speaking. "Audrey, I didn't hide this because I feared your anger. I feared your pain. Brandon isn't the boy you remember. He has lied, used me, even threatened me when I refused. I stayed quiet because I was afraid he'd hurt you. But I also fear that when I'm gone, you'll face him alone. If that day comes, please don't be blind. Remember, you're stronger than you think." I folded the letter, tears falling onto the desk. Gil must have sensed it all. He knew what our son was becoming, but kept silent so I could live in the illusion that our family was still whole. For the first time, I wasn't crying from grief. I was crying because I'd woken up. I looked at our wedding photo. "You're right, Gil," I whispered. "A mother's love can't stay blind forever." The next morning, Naomi arrived. In a brown coat and carrying a worn leather case, she hugged me lightly. "Where do we start?" I handed her, Brandon, confidential. She read quietly for a long time. The eyes of an experienced attorney rarely show surprise, but they still showed sorrow. "How long have you had this?" "Since Gil died." I never opened it. Naomi nodded. "Good. We can prove Brandon exploited his father financially and abused his trust." She photographed each page and backed them up to her firm's secure server. "This is called sealing electronic evidence. If anyone tries to erase or tamper with it, we still have the originals." I nodded, both relieved and bitter. Her careful steps felt like placing my life back into order after years of being dismissed. She opened a notebook and made a list. Door camera, hall camera, a mic in the storage room, you can buy them, and I'll help you register them for lawful use. And remember, don't confront. Let them expose themselves. I stared, half in awe. "Do you handle this often?" "Audrey. Plenty of older folks lose everything with a few signatures. You're lucky you have evidence, clarity, and me." We both smiled. For the first time in days, my chest felt lighter. Naomi told me to get an independent appraisal so the true $400,000 purchase price was documented. When it goes to court, they can't twist it. I booked Gil's old appraisal company for the weekend. Then Naomi suggested we go on offense not by suing right away, but by putting them under the light, invite them to dinner, willingly, let them perform their roles. We'll let them reveal themselves. I hesitated. "You think they'll come?" Naomi smiled. "People who believe they hold power always show up. Trust me." That night, I drafted the invite, hands steady. "Dear Tessa, I'd like to invite you, Brandon, and your parents to dinner this weekend. I want to thank everyone for helping me settle in. I'll make a few of Gil's favorite dishes." I didn't expect a quick reply, but 10 minutes later Tessa wrote, "That's perfect, Mom. I'll tell Brandon. My parents will be thrilled. Can I bring 2 other couples to make it cozier?" I chuckled at the word cozier. Yes, it would be warm, but the fire wouldn't come from the stove. It would come from the truth waiting to flare on the table. Before bed, I arranged everything. The original purchase contract into a clear sleeve labeled property proof, the recorded call onto a fresh USB labeled recording one. All of it tucked into a blue hard folder the same shade as Gil's favorite, shirt. I looked at that folder and whispered, "This time, I won't let anyone trample what you left. I promise." Then I turned off the light and leaned back, listening to the basement door whisper with the night breeze. For the first time in weeks, I felt calm. Not because I had won, but because I wasn't afraid to lose anymore. In the dark, the tiny camera LED glowed. Read everything was ready. The dinner they thought would be a party. For me, it would be a closed courtroom where every lie would be brought into the light. End of part 3, 1,340 words. I never imagined I'd prepare a dinner like this. Not for family, but for people who see me as a thing already traded. That afternoon, Charlotte's sunlight was gentle and gold through the kitchen glass, the kitchen I once dreamed of using to cook for Gil every morning. But today, that room echoed with my son Brandon's voice, barking orders one by one like a supervisor. "The chicken needs to be marinated more, Mom. Tessa's dad doesn't like bland food." Then, "The mashed potatoes must be really smooth, you know how picky they are." I just nodded, gently stirring the sauce. In the oven door's reflection, I caught my own eyes calm in a strange way. Tessa walked in wearing a cream silk dress and a pearl necklace, her voice sweet but her tongue sharp. "Don't forget to sprinkle black pepper on the salad. Last time you forgot the salt and the guests almost had to add it themselves." I gave a thin smile. "I remember. I won't forget anything this time." She glanced at me with a peculiar satisfaction, as if every cutting remark made her feel more powerful. Around 6:30 p.m., the doorbell rang. Brandon straightened his tie and turned to me. "Mom, step aside so we can welcome our guests." I moved back toward the kitchen and quietly watched the door open. Tessa's father, Leonard Pratt, came in first, tall, short silver hair, a stern face. He'd been a federal judge, retired for a few years. Beside him was his wife, Elaine, a fuller-figured woman with the calm air of the upper class. Behind them were two couples, business friends of the Pratt family, all polished and self-assured. The apartment glowed, hard-soled shoes clicked, perfume floated in the air. Tessa opened her arms. "Mom, Dad, this is our new home. Isn't it beautiful?" Leonard nodded. "Quite impressive. It's rare to find somewhere this quiet so close to downtown." I heard Brandon laugh. "We bought it for $650,000. Good asset, good location, worth every penny." That sentence cut into me like a blade. We bought. This condo was Gil's last dream, the place where I wanted to keep what was left of his memory. And now my son used it to show off, to lie in front of strangers. They walked into the living room, praising the rug, admiring the new chandelier Tessa bought with my credit card. I just kept setting the table. My hands sliced cake and ladled sauce with steady rhythm, but my heart had gone cold. Dinner began. They sat around the 8-seat dining table while I stood by, serving like a waiter. Brandon raised a glass of red wine, voice booming. "Thank you, Mom and Dad, and everyone, for celebrating with us. This condo is a big milestone, and partly thanks to my branded mother. Even though her health hasn't been great lately, she still tried to tidy up and cook. We're very grateful." Polite applause. Pitying eyes turned toward me. Tessa added, her tone gentle but loaded. "Mom's a little forgetful, but she loves us very much. This place is close to the hospital, so it's convenient if anything needs checking." I set down the chicken and lifted my head. "You're right," I smiled. I remember the route to the hospital very clearly, thanks to a memory that's still pretty good. No one caught the meaning, only Tessa shot Brandon a look, her lip twitching. They went on eating, laughing, talking stocks and travel. I stood still, listening to lies about me. Brandon told them he had helped Mom buy this condo because she doesn't understand paperwork, and that all maintenance and property taxes were in his name. One of Pratt's friends said, "So dutiful." "Not many kids do that." Brandon gave a smug smile. "I'm just doing what a son should. My mother is a bit confused sometimes, so I have to watch over things." I drew a slow breath to stay steady. I had been waiting for this moment. When Leonard set down his glass, I stepped closer with a blue file folder in hand. "Sorry to interrupt," I said evenly. "I'd like to say a few words." The room went still. All eyes turned to me. Brandon frowned. "Mom, we're just a few minutes," I cut in, "because there seems to be some misunderstanding about this condo." I set the folder on the table. "This is the original purchase contract, price $400,000, paid from my account, not anyone else's. Included are the tax receipts and the wire confirmations from Regions Bank." People glanced at each other. Leonard raised an eyebrow. Tessa went pale. I continued, still calm. "And this," I pulled out a small USB, "is a recording of Brandon and Tessa discussing how to declare me incompetent, petition for guardianship, and sell this condo. They even discussed the price and the facility they planned to put me in, a cheap nursing home in the suburbs." A spoon clinked hard against a plate. Brandon shot up. "What are you talking about?" You're making this up. Sit down, Brandon, Leonard said, low and firm. I nodded to him. Thank you, Judge Pratt. I took out my phone and played the audio. Brandon's voice rang out clearly. My cousin will sign that she's not competent, then we sell the place. When older folks get pulled out of their environment, they go downhill fast. Tessa jolted, blood draining from her face. Leonard sat up straight, the cold eyes of a man who'd sat on the bench for more than 30 years cutting through them. Stop, he said. Play it again from the beginning. I did. Every sentence, every laugh, every calculation echoed through the room like knives tearing through the facade they'd built. When the recording ended, a heavy silence fell. Pratt's friend, a middle-aged man with glasses who'd introduced himself as a family and marital assets attorney, spoke grimly. If this recording is authentic, there are at least 3 crimes here. Conspiracy to defraud assets, coercion of an elderly person, and attempted deprivation of property rights. Each can carry up to 10 years. It cracked the air like thunder. Tessa gasped and grabbed Brandon's hand. Say something, Brandon! But Brandon said nothing. His face flushed, his eyes blazed. I recognized it, the look of the 10-year-old who smashed a window when he didn't get a toy. He growled, You're nothing. That money is mine. It was my father's, and I'm the only son. You blew it without asking anyone. That's right, I said softly. Because he left it to me, not to someone planning to throw me out of my own home. The air thickened. Elaine looked from me to her daughter, lips trembling. Tessa, is this true? Tessa burst into tears and tried to grab her mother's hand, but Elaine pulled away. Leonard stood, his voice low and heavy as a gavel. I thought my daughter chose a decent man. Turns out she married someone willing to rob his own mother. Brandon, if I were still on the bench, you wouldn't get a chance to argue. Brandon turned on me, eyes burning. Are you doing this to humiliate me? I was only trying to help. I met his eyes, my voice even. No, Brandon. You were trying to help yourself. No one spoke. One of Pratt's friends rose first, muttering, I think dinner's over. The second followed, then Elaine, then Leonard. The door closed, and the apartment held only 3, me, Brandon, and Tessa. No laughter, no clinking dishes, only the truth sitting on the table beside a file folder and a small USB. I cleared each spilled glass of wine and each crumpled napkin and felt light. The dinner they had expected was over, but for me, the first chapter of justice had just begun. After everyone left, the apartment was so quiet I could hear the clock in the living room. Overhead lights fell across the tablecloth, highlighting stains of red wine, the traces of a dinner I would never forget. Brandon stood in the middle of the room, face flushed, fists clenched. Tessa collapsed into a chair, shoulders shaking fear or anger, I couldn't tell. I knew if I didn't end this night with a decisive move, I would never have peace. So I walked to the glass cabinet and opened the hidden compartment Naomi had helped me prepare. Inside lay a thick packet tied with a blue ribbon. I carried it to the table and set it down. There's something you don't know, I said, oddly calm. Brandon stared at the packet. What now, Mom? The deed? You want to keep performing this little show? I looked straight at him. No, Brandon. This is my new will. More specifically, an irrevocable trust. Tessa. I looked up, surprised. Irrevocable. Trust? That's right. I opened the file and showed them page by page. Naomi helped me set it up legally, notarized by a law office with 2 independent witnesses. All assets, including this condo, my savings, and remaining investments have been transferred into the trust. I can't pull them back, and no one can amend them without a court order. Brandon squinted. Then who's the beneficiary? I turned to the second page, voice steady. Not you, and not Tessa. He froze, his face twitching. Then who? The Elder Abuse Protection Fund, with Naomi and her firm as legal advisors. When I pass, Everything will be donated to help people like me who were threatened, controlled, and humiliated by their own family." Silence swallowed the room. Brandon let out a hard laugh. "You're joking. I'm your only son." I nodded gently. "You're right, but sons don't shove their mothers into cheap nursing homes or hire fake doctors to sign mental health papers to steal a home. I only—" "Enough, Brandon." I cut in, low and firm. "Gil Whitmore's son doesn't behave like that. If you had any of your father's blood, you'd be ashamed." Tessa shot to her feet. "Wait, how did you set that up? An irrevocable trust can still be voided if the grantor lacked capacity at signing." "You can't." A light laugh came from the doorway. Naomi stepped in, gray coat over her shoulders. Another case in hand. "You're right, Tessa. If Mrs. Audrey lacked capacity, this would be void. Unfortunately for you," she set a small USB on the table, "we recorded a capacity confirmation with an independent psychologist and a notary. All of it's on file." Tessa went white. Brandon swung toward Naomi, voice rough. "Who are you to butt into my family's business?" Naomi smiled, arms crossed. "I'm his mother's attorney. And I strongly advise you not to say anything else that could be used against you in the coming case." Brandon slammed his hand on the table. "You did this to destroy me? To make me a criminal?" I met his eyes, steady enough to make him step back half a pace. "No, Brandon, I'm protecting what's left of my life and your father's honor. You made yourself into a criminal." I didn't need to help. The air thickened. Brandon grabbed the documents, flipped through a few pages, then hurled them onto the table. "This isn't over." "You think a stack of papers can bury me?" I didn't react. I simply opened my phone, hit record, and said quietly, "Thank you for stating your intent. Consider this more evidence of threats and coercion." He glared at me. "You'll regret this." Naomi cut in, voice cool as ice. "If you're planning violence, remember there are lawful cameras here, and everything you say is backed up to the cloud." Tessa tugged his sleeve, whispering, "Let's go, Brandon." "Don't let them." Record more. But Brandon stood rigid, lips shaking with rage. "You canceled the will, you set up a trust, you changed the locks, but you're still my mother." "You'll do what I say!" I shook my head and placed a new set of keys on the table. "No, Brandon, I changed every lock this afternoon, door fobs and the basement lock. You no longer have a spare. If you come in again without permission, that's trespassing." Tessa's voice trembled. "Aren't you afraid?" I looked at her, no anger left, just fatigue. "I am. But fear doesn't earn respect. This time I choose peace, even if it means facing my own son." Tessa looked down, as if something had finally sunk in. Brandon didn't. He snatched up the file, threw it to the floor, then stormed out. Before he left, he shouted, "This isn't over! You'll pay for this!" The door slammed like thunder on a clear day. To be honest, I still get a chill when I hear, "You'll pay for this!" But the glint of my new keys eased my heart. What about you? What struck you more, the threat or the slam of the lock? Leave a few words in the comments. I'll read and cherish every line. The apartment fell silent again. I took a deep breath to steady myself. Naomi stepped over, picked up the scattered file, and put it neatly back together. "Judge Pratt was right," she said quietly. "You need to secure every piece of evidence. He's losing control, and when people like that feel cornered, they can do anything." I nodded. "I know, but this time I'm not hiding." The door opened. Leonard Pratt and Elaine had come back. Maybe they still couldn't believe what they'd seen. Leonard moved closer, his voice warm but firm. "Mrs. Audrey, I owe you an apology for my daughter. I didn't imagine Tessa would go this far." "I don't blame you, Judge Pratt," I said softly. "When parents believe their child is good, we don't see the rest." He nodded, eyes stern. "Then listen to me. Protect your evidence, recordings, copies, cameras, all of it. Your son, I see danger in his eyes. Naomi added, I'll arrange to move everything to a secure archive and send a copy to the local police in case of any trespass. Leonard's voice roughened. If you need it, I still have friends in the system. One call. I smiled gratefully. Thank you, but I think I'll be okay. I have an attorney, evidence, and the belief that I deserve peace. Elaine laid a hand on my shoulder. Not everyone who has children gets love. But you chose, right? You chose yourself? I squeezed her hand. I don't want to beat anyone. I just want to live without bowing my head. They left. Naomi stayed to help me clean up. When it was just the two of us, she looked around, worried. This isn't over, Audrey. He won't give up easily. I let out a small, tired laugh but stood firm. I know. But at least now, all the pieces are face up. The rest? Let the law do its job. I walked Naomi to the door and locked it tight. The light reflected off the new deadbolt. Bright, cold, solid. I touched it and whispered to myself, this isn't just a lock. It's the lock on a new life. In the hall, a draft slipped under the door like a warning. Peace is only temporary. But for the first time in months, I wasn't afraid. I'd gone too far to turn back. On the other side, in the dark, I knew Brandon was planning his next move, and so was I. After that dinner, I thought things would calm down, that Brandon would need time to think, to realize he'd gone too far. I was wrong. Sometimes when someone used to controlling others loses that grip, they don't stop, they escalate. On the first day after the confrontation, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Mom, just listen. I didn't mean it, I just got heated. I didn't respond. I remembered Naomi's words. Don't react, Audrey. Anything he says could be bait. An hour later, the 10th call came. 3 days, did you hear me? 72 hours. If you don't cancel that damn trust, you'll regret it. I hung up and saved the recording. And so it went. Brandon's tone swung like a pendulum all day, begging, threats, fake sympathy. I sat in the living room hearing my own child through the speaker, not fear now, but a mix of sorrow and ice. That evening, Tessa called. Mrs. Audrey, I'm bringing a doctor to see you. Just a quick check to make sure you're stable. Her voice was so sweet I had to stop myself from laughing. Fine, I said. Come on over. I texted Naomi immediately. Less than half an hour later, Tessa's Lexus pulled up. A man in a white coat with a badge reading Dr. Stephen Harris came with her. He shook hands with the security guard and said loudly, I'm here at the son's request to assess the patient's mental health. The guard nodded, but I was inside watching on the new camera Naomi had installed. When Tessa rang, Naomi appeared behind them with a local officer. Excuse me, Naomi said evenly. May I see your medical license? The man fumbled and produced a fake card with a crooked logo and a misspelled name. Naomi frowned. Thank you. I'll verify that. She turned to the officer. Can you check the North Carolina Medical Registry for this name? 5 minutes later, the officer said quietly, No such person. You're under arrest for impersonating a medical professional. Tessa went pale. I didn't know. Brandon must have. Naomi just smiled. You can explain that. At the station. They were escorted away. I stood in my apartment listening to the door close, feeling both bitter and relieved. The worst thing wasn't being attacked, it was watching your own family become strangers before your eyes. The next 3 days, it didn't stop. On Tuesday at midday, 2 rumpled men in suits knocked. They claimed to be from the Elder Protection Agency, speaking in thick Southern drawls. We got a report that Mrs. Audrey Whitmore is being isolated. We need a safety check. I watched on the door camera. One was smoking in the hallway. The other held a grimy notepad with misspelled headings. I pressed the intercom. Elder protection staff don't show up smoking at someone's door. One raised an eyebrow and sneered. Think you're smart, do you? Naomi was at her office, but one text from me was enough. 10 minutes later, she arrived with real police. The two were cuffed for impersonating officials. Naomi turned to me, firm. See, Audrey? When your boundaries begin to hold, bad actors will try everything to take them back. That's when we do the opposite, reinforce them. That afternoon, her tech team installed a full camera system, one in the living room, two in the hallways, a small one near the kitchen window. Everything tied into building security and Naomi's phone. You don't have to. Open the door for anyone, she said. If anything's off, I'll get the alert before you do. I nodded, feeling safer than I had in a long time. Late Thursday night, just before midnight, I'd barely turned off the lights when glass shattered in the kitchen. A sharp, icy sound split the quiet. I jolted upright, heart pounding. Cold air poured through the busted window, along with heavy footsteps. "Where are you?" Brandon's voice. I held my breath, slipped into the bedroom closet, eased the door shut, and clutched my phone. "No one saw us, right?" Tessa's shaky voice. "Shut up," Brandon snapped. "We just need those files and everything's ours." I shook not from fear, but from disbelief at how far the sun I'd raised had fallen. The motion sensor triggered the soft hallway lights part of Naomi's setup. 2 seconds later, my phone buzzed. "Intrusion detected. Stay quiet, police, en route." I heard them rummaging in the kitchen, things hitting the floor, then Tessa's choked whisper, "Brandon, we're wrong. Stop." He only yelled, "Shut up. It's her fault. If not for that damn trust, we wouldn't have to do this." Blue lights flickered outside. Sirens sliced the night. "Police! Drop everything!" I cracked the closet door and caught a glimpse of Brandon turning, face ashen. For an instant, our eyes met the same eyes that once begged me for bedtime stories, now wild with panic and hate. Then the shout, "On the ground!" Heavy footsteps, the cold, final click of handcuffs. Tessa cried. Brandon was silent. Naomi rushed in, draped a coat over my shoulders, and pulled me from the closet. "It's over, Audrey." They were caught in the act, breaking and entering, vandalism, harassment, threats. I sat on the couch, hands shaking, breath ragged. Naomi held up her phone and replayed the footage. Brandon smashing the window, stepping inside, Tessa behind him, hands trembling, their voices crystal clear. "I'll file everything." "The cameras and audio are enough to get a permanent restraining order," she said. I nodded, tears slipping down, uncertain if from fear or release. Outside, officers took statements. Blue and red lights spilled across the broken glass, scattering like memories weaving old and new. I stood and looked around the wrecked kitchen, the shards glittering in the glow. And in that mess, I realized I was still here, still fully entitled to stand in my own home. For the first time in months, I felt a nameless kind of strength, the kind you only find when you dare to set a final boundary. The next morning, after the police left, I called a repairman to replace the glass and change every lock yet again. Naomi sat with me in the kitchen, hands wrapped around a coffee cup, her voice calm but firm. "We'll file everything with the court this week. Brandon will face the consequences. And this time, the law will speak for you." I nodded softly. Outside the window, the first light of dawn spilled through the new pane, clear, bright, dustless. I touched the glass, felt the cold on my fingertips, and smiled. "Do you see this, Gil?" I whispered. "Our home is finally safe." On the morning of the hearing, Charlotte lay under a thin veil of mist, as if the city were holding its breath. I stepped out of Naomi's car, leather gloves warming hands that still trembled a little. A few reporters lingered by the oak doors, cameras lifted. Naomi murmured, "Don't worry, they don't know your face. We asked the court to protect your identity." I nodded. I've stood in plenty of dry offices and signed hundreds of accounting forms in my life, but I had never entered a courtroom as both a victim and the person standing up for herself. The courtroom was small, just 12 gallery seats. Brandon sat across the aisle in a black suit, head slightly bowed, face gaunt but eyes still flashing defiance. Tessa sat a few rows away, avoiding his gaze. The judge read out the charges, clear and steady. Defendant Brandon Pierce is charged with breaking and entering, property damage, harassment, and threats against an elderly person. Today's hearing is to review evidence and decide on a restraining order. Brandon's attorney, a gray-haired man with a confident stance, stood first. Your Honor, this entire situation stems from Mrs. Audrey Whitmore's agitation and emotional instability. My client only came to talk, but given her history of stress after her husband's death, she overreacted. The matter has been exaggerated. I clenched my hands, but Naomi rested hers lightly on mine, a quiet signal to breathe. Our turn, she said, then rose, her calm voice cutting like a cold blade. Your Honor, we have authenticated evidence proving Mrs. Audrey is fully competent, stable, and the one who was attacked, not the other way around. She presented a sealed packet, independent appraisal of the condo, $400,000, signed by Hamilton and Lee Real Estate. A capacity confirmation video recorded by Dr. Daughter. Evan Carter, a licensed psychologist in North Carolina, affirming I was fully lucid and understood all legal decisions at the time I signed the trust. Transparent financial statements provided by independent accountant Mia Delgado, showing no outside influence over my income or spending. Naomi faced the bench, voice slow and precise. Your Honor, no one is controlling Mrs. Audrey. She is exercising a basic right every citizen has to protect her property and her dignity. The defense objected. The judge motioned them quiet. Naomi signaled, and a precinct officer brought in a sealed USB. This is the break-in footage from the night of June 23rd, she said. The court monitor lit up, Brandon in frame, hard object in hand, smashing the kitchen window and climbing in. Tessa behind him, voice shaking. Brandon, we're wrong. The audio was crisp. There was no room to deny it. When the clip ended, the room fell silent. I could hear the clock on the wall. The defense cleared his throat, reaching, Your Honor, this was a momentary emotional lapse, not an intent to harm. Enough, the judge cut in. The evidence is more than clear. Naomi stood. We request a restraining order within a radius of 300 meters and temporary probation. The judge nodded and made notes. Brandon lifted his head, face drained. He wanted to speak, but when his eyes met mine, his lips only quivered, no words came out. During the short recess, I sat in a side room and took a long breath. Tessa suddenly stepped in, dark circles under her eyes, voice rough. Mrs. Audrey, I want to cooperate. I know I was wrong. Naomi stiffened, but I signaled her to let me listen. Tessa stared at the table. Brandon said, if you kept resisting, he would slip a sleeping pill into your evening tea. I thought he was bluffing, but... She went quiet. Tears slid down. I didn't think he'd actually do it. Naomi nodded. Are you willing to sign a statement? Tessa whispered. Yes. I just want this to end. Back in the courtroom, Tessa took the stand. The judge asked, Do you swear to tell the truth? Yes, Your Honor. She recounted everything. Brandon's repeated plans to make me seem unstable, the search for a fake doctor, even talk of light dosing to make her confused. I closed my eyes and let each word land like a stone. It hurt, but strangely, it didn't wound the way it once did. It felt like a long chapter closing. The judge ruled, Defendant Brandon Pierce is placed on 18 months probation and is barred from approaching the plaintiff within a radius of 300 meters, including by phone or electronic means. Any violation will be converted to jail time immediately. The prosecutor added, separate investigations are underway regarding medical impersonation and impersonating public officials. Tessa bowed her head, murmured, I'm sorry. I met her eyes. I know. But the apology isn't for me, it's for yourself. As people filed out, a familiar, solemn voice came from behind. "Mrs. Audrey." I turned. Judge Leonard Pratt approached, face sorrowful but sincere. I want to apologize as a father. We didn't raise our child for this." I looked at him and offered a small smile. "Every family has its own lesson to learn, Judge Pratt. What matters is who's willing to learn it." He nodded and squeezed my hand. "If you need anything, I'll help." "I just need peace," I said. "And justice like today." When I stepped outside, sunlight flooded the street. Charlotte seemed to glow after so many days of rain. Naomi walked beside me, a gentle smile on her face. "You did it, Audrey! You didn't just win a case, you won against your past." I looked up into the clear blue. "No one won here, Naomi. Someone simply learned to stand." A reporter came closer, cautious. "Ma'am, we've heard you're a victim in a recent elder abuse case. Would you like to share anything?" I hesitated, then said, "I don't want to talk about myself. I want people to remember that elder abuse isn't only physical. It starts with words, with taking, with contempt. If you stay silent too long, they start to believe you don't have a voice." I paused, looking into the lens. "At some point, you have to speak not for revenge, but to live." She thanked me. I stepped down the stairs. The air carried sun-warmed lavender from the nearby park. I breathed deeply, my lungs opening as if for the first real breath in ages. A group of students laughed in the distance. A woman walked her dog. Church bells drifted on the breeze, simple, peaceful, and to me, light after the storm. I turned to Naomi. "You know, maybe Gil is looking down." Smiling, she nodded. "And I'm sure he's proud." I smiled, and as if closing my own journey out loud, said, "In the end, no one can take my life from me when I'm the one willing to protect it." Charlotte shone that day. And for me, it was the first morning of a new beginning. One morning in mid-August, with soft sun and a hint of lavender blowing in from the balcony, Naomi brought someone new. "Mrs. Audrey," she said, "this is Linda Park, Director of Safe Steps for Seniors, which supports older adults facing abuse or financial exploitation. I think you two will have a lot to talk about." Linda, a Korean-American woman around 60, was small-framed with bright eyes and a warm smile. Her handshake was cool and steady. "I read about your case," she said gently but decisively. "Thank you for speaking up. Few people have the courage to do that, especially with family." I smiled and invited her in. We sat at the dining table that had once been a battlefield where every lie was stripped away. Today, it felt quiet and safe. Coffee in the air, distant traffic humming. After a few minutes, Linda set down her cup and looked around. "Mrs. Audrey, I have a bold idea, and I'll regret not saying it if I keep quiet." "Please," I said. "This place warm, quiet, safe, could it become a temporary refuge for a few older women? Just for a few days when they've just left dangerous situations, until they're moved to stable housing." I went still. I could see myself from months ago shaking, seeking a door away from threatening voices. "You mean, let them stay here?" "Not exactly." Linda smiled. "We don't want to intrude on your privacy. Maybe the adjacent service wing, in the same building, short-term units, or even just a community room, a place to breathe, eat a hot meal, and remember they're not alone." I fell quiet. Sunlight flashed on the pane I'd just replaced, clean and clear like another new start. "Let me think," I said, and, honestly, my heart began to stir with something not called fear, but purpose. That evening, I reread the building policies. The complex had a serviced wing short-term apartments rented for a few weeks. I remembered a clause. Residents could lease one long-term for personal or non-profit use, pending approval. The next morning, Naomi and I met with the building manager. I'd like to secure a unit in the service block, I said. Not for commercial rental, as a temporary refuge for older women in crisis. He looked surprised. But when Naomi produced the trust paperwork and our partnership plan with safe steps for seniors, the tone shifted. That's a wonderful idea, he said. We'll need an internal review, but I doubt there'll be objections. Naomi smiled at me. And for taxes, don't worry. I'll structure a compliant nonprofit framework. Your trust can allocate operating funds without violating any terms. 3 weeks later, I held the keys to a new unit, 3rd floor, west-facing, with a small balcony over the park. I stood in the empty room and drew a deep breath. Fresh paint, clean wood, and something pure, the scent of freedom. Linda's team came to help set up. Nothing fancy, she said. Just safety. We placed 3 low wooden beds, a small dining table, a bookshelf, a lounge chair, and a board with simple affirmations. You still matter. You still belong. I enrolled in an online psychological first aid and elder safety course offered by Duke. Short sessions, but they helped me understand trauma and isolation, the kind I and so many others had borne. Naomi handled the paperwork, and Linda introduced me to Patricia Hale, a social worker who'd spent years in domestic violence shelters. Patricia's voice was soft as cotton. When she entered a room, the air seemed to settle. "Mrs. Audrey," she said, "I feel lucky to start this with you." The first women arrived in early fall. Beatrice, 70, kicked out by her son after she refused to sell her co-op to invest. Joan, 73, saddled with debt after a grandson borrowed her name for credit cards. Lila, 61, fresh from a marriage where her medication had been controlled for 7 years. They came looking different, one with a torn suitcase, one with a plastic bag of clothes, but their eyes held the same dullness of lost trust. I saw myself in them, anxious, doubtful, unsure the world could be kind again. On the first night, we ate together. Simple food, chicken soup, toast, apple salad. No one said much until I lifted my water glass and said, "We're not victims, we're on our way back to ourselves." The room went quiet, then Beatrice began to cry. Joan laid a hand on her shoulder. Lila managed a small smile. We built a small routine. Morning light exercise on the balcony. Afternoon basic banking skills, reading statements, protecting accounts. Evening group counseling with Patricia Spacebat to tell our stories. On weekends, I ran a tech basics session, how to use a phone, video call, create strong passwords. Something gentle and surprising happened within weeks. Beatrice started to laugh again. Joan wrote a letter thanking her bank for helping resolve fraudulent debt. Lila asked to learn more computer skills to find remote work. One winter evening, I watched them around the table under a warm lamp, laughter mingling with the faint clink of cutlery, and thought, I didn't just survive. I am living again and helping others do the same. One afternoon, Linda brought a small carved wooden sign. "You should name this place," she said. "A name?" I smiled. "I haven't thought of one." Naomi pointed to the carving. "The W room, where we return to ourselves." I read it slowly, each word touching a tender place. The W room, where we return to ourselves. Linda smiled. W for Whitmore, or for women, or for we. Who knows? Maybe for the will to live, I said, eyes stinging a little. That night, I sat by the window, light stretching like golden threads across the park. In the unit next door, 3 women cooked dinner once broken, now piecing life back together. I opened Gil's old notebook and wrote one last line. "If you're still here with me, you can see it." I did what we both believed in, turned pain into a shelter for others. I closed the book and smiled. The door to the W room swung open. Patricia stepped in with a small bouquet. "Mrs. Audrey," she said, "they want to thank you for dinner and for this place." "No need," I answered. I'm giving them what I once wished for, a door that opens. In the hall, a breeze rattled the new wooden sign. Under the light, the carving stood out. The W room, where we return to ourselves. I stared at it for a long time, feeling a deep, quiet peace. I didn't just survive. I came back, and with me, other two women, into a new chapter where care outgrows fear, and a grandmother once sent to the basement now opens the door for light to come in. That night, Beatrice had a panic attack. She woke gasping, hands shaking, eyes wild as if the room had turned back into the house where her son barked at her every morning. I rushed in and held her hand. "You're safe, Beatrice. You're in the W room. No one can touch you here." She nodded, but tears kept coming, her body curled tight. I stayed until her breathing slowed. Near 3 a.m., Beatrice finally slept. As I rose to leave, moonlight fell on a framed photo of the three of us at the W room's opening. I looked at it, warm and heavy all at once. Recovery, I realized, is never a straight line. The next morning, Joan sat before a new stack of bank papers, face pale. "I can't read any of this," she whispered. "I'm scared, Audrey. Every time I see numbers on a page, I hear my grandson's voice. Sign it, Grandma. It's just a form." I knew that fear not of words or numbers, but of memories of being tricked. That afternoon, I called accountant Mia Delgado, who had helped me prepare for court. "Mia, can you teach a read, understand, sign class for my group? We need someone to decode this world of paperwork." Mia laughed on the phone. "A finance class for grandmas? I love it. I'll be there tomorrow." The session was special. Mia brought a whiteboard and wrote simple truths. Sign equals agree. Read equals protect yourself. She flagged common scams and showed how to call bank hotlines and underscored no one is too old to understand, only taught to be afraid. Joan listened closely, and for the first time in years, she signed the confirmation for her own new account, hands still trembling, smile bright. Lila, the youngest, still wasn't sleeping. She often jolted awake at 2 or 3 a.m., staring into the dark. One evening, Patricia arrived with a deck of therapy cards. "Story cards," she said. "Each one is a feeling. Pick the one that's you." Lila chose a card of a woman at a door, key in hand. I don't know whether to open or close it," she whispered. "That's okay," Patricia said. "What matters is that you're holding the key, not anyone else." Listening outside, I felt my chest ease. They were reclaiming control, the thing I once thought I'd lost forever. One sunny afternoon, I rehung Gil's photo where the morning light lands. Quietly, as if he were in the room, I said, "We're using the remaining $200,000 just as you wanted, not to run, but to build a place where someone can stand again when they thought they'd fallen." His gentle smile seemed to agree. I touched the glass and felt an unfamiliar peace. A week later, the local precinct called. "Mrs. Whitmore, quick update. Brandon Pierce made a minor violation of the order. He parked near the building for a few minutes, then left. We issued a warning and added electronic monitoring. I was silent for a moment. News like that used to rattle me. This time it felt like a small wave that touched shore and faded. "I understand," I said. "Thank you for letting me know." I hung up and looked out at the afternoon sun on the street. I realized I wasn't shaking anymore. I wasn't living in fear. I was living in clarity. More and more, the complex embraced the W room. First, a few curious neighbors stopped by. Then they brought baked goods, hot soup, even signed up to teach yoga and read aloud in the evenings. An older gentleman upstairs gave us a rose bush. "To make the room prettier," he said, "so anyone who comes in can see hope." Warmth bloomed in my chest. When you dare to open a door, the light doesn't just come in, it invites kindness with it. 3 months in, the media noticed. A woman reporter called, "Mrs. Audrey, we'd like to do a feature on this community program. Your story could inspire many. I thought a long time, then said, okay, on one condition. Don't name my son. Let the story be about what we're building, not what we lost. She was quiet, then said, I understand. We'll honor that. The piece ran the next week with a plain headline, From Hurt to Hope, a small corner in Charlotte for mothers once forgotten. It drew thousands of shares, but not only praise. Amid warm comments were cutting lines, she must not be so innocent. If her son hates her, there's a reason. Old and trying to play hero. The first time I read them, I winced. Then I remembered Naomi. The internet doesn't know the truth, only you do. I learned to mute, not engage, and never let strangers decide my worth. One quiet evening while I sorted files, my phone buzzed. A text from Lila, thank you for giving us a name, not just victim. I read that line over and over, tears falling while my lips still held a smile. Outside, a breeze slipped through the hallway, making the wooden sign, the W room where we return to ourselves, gently rattle. I looked around the apartment. Beatrice was brewing tea. Joan was straightening the curtains. Patricia was jotting notes for tomorrow's group session. None of us is perfect. None of us has never broken. But each one is learning how to piece herself back together with patience, with trust, and with a quiet kind of strength only those who have fallen truly understand. I suddenly remembered Gil's words, "You're stronger than you think." Now I understand that sentence fully. Strength isn't never falling, it's standing up, brushing off the dust, and moving forward without retreat. I lit a small candle. The warm light reflected on his picture frame. Gil, I whispered. We took a long way around to get back to where we were meant to stand among people who know how to love and be loved. Outside, Charlotte sparkled at night. A new chapter was opening, not loud, not dazzling, but bright enough to light the way for those still finding their way back to themselves. One early winter morning, when mist still blurred the lake, Naomi stepped into the W room with a thick envelope. "Mail for you, Audrey," she said, setting it on the table. "From Brandon's attorney." I looked at the beige envelope, the neat italic type, and felt my chest tighten. It had been almost 8 months since the hearing ended. I thought the waters had finally calmed. Naomi sat across from me, cautious. I read it. Nothing legal, just Brandon asking to meet. Says he wants to apologize and end things peacefully. I was quiet. Old memories surged. My son's voice that night. "You'll pay for this." The shatter of glass, the eyes full of hatred. And yet, in the middle of those dark flashes, a small beam of light, an 8-year-old boy running around the house, shouting, "Mom, I fixed the lamp." The mother's heart in me flickered for a moment, but reason pulled me back. I knew that loop, the cycle of renewed harm, remorse, pleading, then the hurting again. More than a few women in the W room had said the same line. He said sorry, and I believed him, until it happened again. I looked at Naomi. If I refuse, is that cruel? She shook her head. Forgiveness is a right, but reconnection isn't required. You can forgive and still keep distance. Sometimes the greatest kindness is knowing when to close the door. I sat a long time with the unopened letter. Finally, I picked up a pen and wrote a brief reply. "Brandon, I received your message. I wish you peace and hope you find the help you need to understand and heal yourself. But I will not meet." That conversation would only take us both back to the old place. I encourage you to try therapy. And please, do not contact me again. I am not angry. I'm simply choosing to live in peace. Audrey. I signed, folded it, and handed it to Naomi. She read it and nodded. Perfect. Calm, clear, without resentment. I'll send it to his attorney. After Naomi left, I looked at Gil's photo hanging in the sunny corner. Morning light fell across that gentle smile. I said quietly. Do you see, Gil? I learned how to close a door without locking my heart. A few days later, my inbox pinged. Sender, Tessa Rowan Pierce. The subject line said only, I owe you something. I read in silence. Mrs. Audrey, I'm not trying to justify anything. I let fear and greed drive me. Brandon is no longer the person I loved. I'm in a recovery program and want to do what's right. I accept my share of responsibility and would like to make a symbolic repayment, a gift in Mr. Gil's name, whom I insulted indirectly through my actions. I understand if you won't accept it, but I want to send it to close a chapter. I forwarded it to Naomi. She read and said, if you want, I'll handle it properly. We can route it directly to the W Room Support Fund in Mr. Gil's name. I think he'd like that. I smiled. Do it. Let that intention become something good. A week later, I received a handwritten card from Judge Leonard Pratt. Inside were a few uneven lines. Wishing you health and peace. May all good things come to the W Room and the women there. Leonard and Elaine. I finished reading and smiled softly. No bitterness, no aftertaste. I filed the card in the small drawer labeled, Done. Life went on for us, simple and full of life. Beatrice grew an herb garden on the balcony. Mint, rosemary, lavender. Every morning she watered and said, each little leaf is a thank you for being alive. Joan became the W Room's treasurer. Her ledger was so tidy that Mia had to say, when I retire, you can take my chair. Lila was confident enough to volunteer at the library, teaching reading to older women. On her first day, she sent me a photo. 3 women around a table, grinning over open books. I looked at those images and felt like I was watching souls bloom after a long winter. One afternoon, I stood on the balcony and looked out. Charlotte was easing into the holidays, lights strung across buildings, their glow spilling onto the streets like a river of stars. I breathed in. The wind carried the smell of waffle cookies from the cafe nearby. In that moment, I understood more deeply than ever. I had come back to life, not because someone allowed it, but because I allowed myself to live not with the past, but with the present. I looked around the apartment that used to be a battlefield and was now a shared home. Laughter from the living room, the smell of hot soup, the evening news on TV. Peace, earned peace, not something handed to me. I realized I hadn't heard the old doorbell in a long time, that urgent alarm of a sound. That afternoon, I called a technician to change it. What kind do you want? He asked. I want a sound that doesn't startle me. When someone comes, I said. Just a light wind. When he tested it, the tone rang ting, ting, like wind moving through Beatrice's herb garden. I smiled. Perfect. That night I sat by the window finishing notes for the W Room's monthly report. Outside, light rain tapped the clean pane. I closed my notebook, about to switch off the lamp when my phone buzzed. An unfamiliar number. I hesitated, then picked up. Excuse me, is this the place for older women who've been abused? The voice was hoarse, tight, tired, the sound of someone who had cried too long. I glanced at the wooden sign on the wall, the W Room, where we return to ourselves. I took a breath and spoke softly, like a lullaby. Yes, it is. Take a breath. Come to us. It's safe here, you're not alone. Silence on the line, then a sigh, weak but full of hope. Thank you. I'll come. I set the phone down and looked around the room where every crack had been mended with trust. Outside, the wind chimes sounded softly, like the past greeting the present. I whispered to myself, letting my voice blend into that sound. This door stays open, but only for those trying to return to themselves. Then I turned off the lamp and let the hall light spill through the crack. Soft as a ribbon. The W Room was ready to welcome someone new, and another life was about to begin again, the way mine once did. That morning, Winter wind moved through the corridor, carrying damp cold and the smell of toast from downstairs. I was making tea when Linda came in, her face tense. "Mrs. Audrey," she said, closing the door gently. "We have a new case. A 76-year-old named Nora Alvarado, immigrant from Guatemala. Her grandson is holding all her papers, her green card, and her savings. She's been sleeping at a nearby church, but the priest says she's afraid to go back." I set the cup down, my heart tightening. "Does she have anywhere else to go?" "No," Linda said, "and last night it dropped close to below freezing. I think the W room is the only warm place right now." 15 minutes later, the door opened. Patricia guided in, a tiny woman, loose white hair, rubber sandals worn down to shapeless. The coat on her shoulders was borrowed, buttons missing, hem torn. "Mrs. Nora," I said, stepping forward, "please sit. No one here asks about your past. We just need to know that right now you're safe." She looked up, eyes exhausted but deep. "Gracias, señora," she whispered, taking my hand dry, trembling like a leaf. That afternoon, Linda and Patricia huddled at the dining table. "The problem is documents," Linda said, opening her laptop. "If her grandson has the green card and social security number, Nora can't get any assistance." Patricia nodded. "I'll contact the city's humanitarian office. They have an emergency path for elder financial abuse. We need lawful temporary status to open a case." Added, "For food and medical care, I'll draw from the trust for the first month. Gil would definitely agree." Linda smiled, hands pausing in midair. "Mr. Gill is your husband, right?" I nodded toward the photo in the corner. "He left insurance and wished I'd use it where it belongs. I think now I know where belongs is." Patricia glanced at me, then at Nora asleep on the sofa, mouth moving lightly, as if dreaming. "Mrs. Audrey," she said softly, "he must be proud." 3 days later, Nora's temporary status was approved. Patricia shared the news over dinner. "You'll get immigration support and emergency aid. They're also letting us open a dedicated account so Nora can receive assistance directly." Nora squeezed my hand, eyes wet. "Your Mr. Gill is still here in every good decision you make." I smiled, my nose stinging. "Maybe so. I don't see him in dreams anymore, but I see him in everyone who walks through this door." By month's end, the building hosted its first community dinner. A resident initiative after seeing the W room's ripple of good. People brought home-cooked dishes, soup, cakes, salads, hot cider. No stage, just a few long tables with checkered cloths. The building manager asked me to say a few words. I stood, mic shaking a little, and looked at the kind faces, the neighbor who helped mount cameras, the widow from 6 floors up who brings cakes, the young guard who always lifts boxes. I spoke slowly. "Thank you for turning this place into a real community. We can't fix the years already gone, but we still have time to be kind. And I believe that's enough to change someone's world." Applause rose. Nora stood and hugged me from behind. A hint of mint in her hair drifted past, gentle as a thank you that didn't need words. 2 days later, Naomi brought me a digital envelope. "Email from Brandon," she said. More than 10 pages. I stared at the screen, the cursor blinking on. Unread. My heart dipped. "Did you read it?" "I did," Naomi said. "Same themes: remorse, promises to change, says he's leaving Charlotte. But Audrey, I don't think you need to read it. You've closed that chapter." I nodded, smiling slightly. "You know what I'm going to do." Naomi smiled back and clicked archive. That door closed again quietly, without sound, without resentment. That evening, Beatrice and I replaced the hallway bulbs. "Warm light makes people feel safer," I said. Beatrice nodded, smiling. "Also makes the skin look better." I laughed. When we finished, I hung a small wooden sign near the entrance, the letters cleanly carved. "If you need safety, knock 3 times. Nuban Kun and Tuan," Haigobalan. I stepped back to admire it. Just a few words, but they might be a lifeline for someone in the middle of despair. That night, wind hit the windows hard, branches tapped the glass. I was reviewing our operations. Log when I heard 3 soft knocks. Knock, knock, knock. Not the bell, not the wind. 3 clear, hesitant beats. I opened the door. A woman stood there in a raincoat, hair tangled, clutching a plastic bag with both hands. Her eyes were swollen red, her voice shook. I heard that if you need a place, you can come here. Is this the W room? I looked at her and recognized in those eyes the image of everyone who had stepped through our door lost, afraid, but still holding a shred of belief that the world could be better. I smiled and opened wide. Yes, it is. Please come in. Here, we start again with a name and a hello. She hesitated, then said softly, "My name is Evelyn." "I'm Audrey," I said, pouring tea. "Sit down, Evelyn. We start with a cup of tea. Everything gets better from there." As she sat, Beatrice brought a towel, Lila grabbed a blanket, Joan made more tea. No one needed to ask about the past, we simply cared, as if we'd been doing it forever. Outside, the hallway light cast a warm glow on the knock 3 times sign, making it shine in the rainy night. I stood and took in the scene, my heart swelling. The W room is no longer just an apartment, it's a chosen family, not bound by blood, but by a shared belief that there's still a place to return to, whether you arrive in rain or in fear. I looked up at the city of Charlotte resting under the night, quiet, with streetlights reflected on the water. I murmured to myself, this story doesn't end. It simply transforms. And it was true when Evelyn lifted her head. A small light flickered in her eyes, the same light I once found in myself. I set down my cup and sat with them at the table. We didn't need many words. We just had to be there, present, quiet, full of meaning. Outside, the city went to sleep. And the W room, where the once abandoned are finding themselves again, stayed lit, small and steady, like a night watch flame guiding lost souls. Home. Morning in Charlotte was still. I sat by the window, dew on the frame, the sun just peeking over distant buildings. On the table, a brown leather notebook lay open, and with a slow hand, I wrote 3 words. I am still here. Not as a declaration, but as a reminder. After all the storms and the pushes to the bottom, I was still here in the same apartment that had been a battleground and was now a place of healing. I no longer needed anyone to prove I was a good mother or a faithful wife. I just needed to know I was someone who lived by her boundaries. Gil once dreamed of a quiet home where he and I would grow flowers, listen to jazz, and watch the sun set over a garden. He left before that dream took shape. But in another way, I think I made it real for him. I didn't grow flowers, I built a home for women whose voices had been taken. We don't just share space, we share strength. Voices that once shook now ring out in bright rooms. Brandon once tried to take everything: money, the condo, my dignity. But in the end, I was the one who reclaimed it all, not possessions, but my selfhood and the freedom to redefine myself. I've learned that forgiveness isn't opening the old door to someone who hurt you. Forgiveness is changing the lock. It's letting others go and keeping the peace for yourself. That morning, while everyone in the W room still slept, I opened my laptop and created a new file. Title: Anti-Elder Abuse Toolkit for Families, the W Manual. I wrote the simplest guidance: how to recognize manipulation, how to preserve evidence legally, a list of hotlines and protective laws. And finally, one closing line: you have the right to be safe, respected, and heard at any age. I plan to release it free on our community page. Naomi promised to help edit and register it. This will help more people than you think, she said. I smiled. I'm not trying to save anyone. I just want them to know. They're not alone. At noon, Beatrice called me to the balcony. Look, she pointed at the herb box. The basil bloomed. I thought it wouldn't make it through winter. I laughed. Just like us. We thought we were done, but give us a little warmth, and we bud again. Beatrice nodded, a new light in her eyes. In the living room, Joan was keeping the books, glasses sliding down her nose. Lila showed Nora how to use a smartphone. They giggled like two girls in a computer class. Looking at them, I saw a complete picture. Every wrinkle, every silver hair, every smile, each one a small victory for people who once thought they had nothing left. I set the camera on the tripod and clicked. The first group photo of the W room. Me, Beatrice, Joan, Lila, and Nora. 5 women, 5 stories, 5 different gazes, sharing one truth: we are still here. I closed my journal and wrote the final line. As long as there are 3 knocks, the W room will stay open. I set down the pretentious pen and leaned back. Outside, the curtains stirred. Mint and coffee mingled in the air. The city of Charlotte was waking. I knew there were doors still shut somewhere, women sitting silent, waiting for someone to knock. And I prayed they would hear our voices, the ones who dared to say no. I looked out at the balcony. Morning sun laid gold across the wooden floor. A soft breeze made the wooden sign, the W room, where we return to ourselves, tremble lightly. The faint chime blended with my heartbeat, steady, peaceful, free. I smiled. Life may have taken a lot, a husband, a son, trust, but it cannot take the will to live true to myself. I understand now freedom isn't going far away. Freedom is staying without fear. I closed the journal and looked at the group photo on the wall. Beatrice tending plants, Joan beaming, Lila flashing a victory sign, Nora with hands folded in prayer. And me sitting among them, silver hair bright in the sun, mouth curved in a smile, not for anyone else, but because I am truly living. Quietly I said, Gil, you taught me to love, but you didn't teach me how to love myself. Now I know. Light slipped through the window, falling across his frame, an answer without words. On a morning like any other, I sat to write, poured tea, and listened to footsteps in the hall. I once believed that when my own story ended, everything would stay calm forever. It didn't. Life has no period, only a change in key, like a song moving into its chorus. And I know the W room will go on with new people, new stories, and new knocks. 3 knocks, small but enough to brighten a long night. Thank you for staying with me until now. If you're still listening, maybe your heart has a wound too small, but enough to keep you quiet for a long time. I hope this story reminds you, you're not weak because you once trusted. You're strong because you chose to stand up. I truly want to know, what city are you listening from? And if there was a moment that made your throat tighten, write me a line. Not to lament, but so we know that at any age, we can still find one another through kindness. If this story helped you believe a little more in the strength of older people, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave your note. Every comment you write can be a small light in the night, guiding someone who's lost, like those who once knocked 3 times at the door of the W room.